On Christmas morning, my parents smiled as they handed my sister a key, then said, "We got her a house. One day you'll get it." I stayed silent until Dad opened my gift. His smile vanished instantly. You know that moment when your entire world shatters? When everything you thought you knew about your family, about love, about trust, just implodes in an instant. Mine did. Last Christmas morning. 1 minute, my parents were beaming, handing my sister, Emma, a house key like it was the most natural thing in the world. The next, my dad's face went completely blank as he opened my gift, and I realized it was all a lie. What the hell had just happened? My name's Stephanie Adams, I'm 29, and I can still feel the sting of those words, the raw disbelief on their faces. Growing up in our quiet Boston suburb, the dynamic between me and Emma was always, well, complicated. We were only 2 years apart, but in our parents' eyes, we might as well have been from different planets. Emma, the artistic free spirit, all flowing auburn hair and paint-stained fingers, she was always the apple of my parents' eye. Even well into her 30s, constantly struggling financially, they never stopped praising her creative spirit, always defending her life choices, no matter how impractical. Then there was me, Stephanie, the practical one. I was the academic achiever, scholarship to Northeastern, a successful career as a financial analyst in downtown Boston. By 29, I had a comfortable apartment overlooking the harbor, a healthy investment portfolio, the kind of stability my parents always preached about, but never seemed to truly value when I actually achieved it. "Numbers are safe, Steph," Dad would say almost dismissively, whenever I shared news of a promotion or a bonus. He made my accomplishments sound like I'd chosen the easy route. Emma is really putting herself out there with her art. Putting herself out there had really translated to a decade of my parents covering her rent, paying off her credit cards, and financing art supplies for projects that, let's be honest, rarely saw the light of day. Me. I'd been financially independent since college, never asking them for a dime after graduation. Our family gatherings became painfully predictable. Emma would inevitably arrive late, usually with some fresh crisis. A gallery showing fell through. A boyfriend didn't understand her vision. My parents would immediately rally around her, offering solutions, money, endless emotional support. I'd just sit there, quietly sipping my wine, wondering if they even remembered I was in the room. Last Thanksgiving, it hit particularly hard. I just closed a major account at work, securing my position during company-wide layoffs and earning a substantial year-end bonus. When I tried to share the news, Mom cut me off mid-sentence. "Honey, that's great, but Emma is going through something serious right now. Her landlord raised the rent again, and we need to figure out how to help her." Later that evening, I overheard Dad telling Emma they'd figure something out for her housing, that they always take care of family. I remember going back to my hotel room that night, feeling a literal gut punch, wondering why their definition of family sometimes seemed to exclude me. Despite all of it, I truly love my parents and my sister. I knew Emma struggled with anxiety beneath that bohemian exterior, and I understood our parents felt a need to protect her. I'd learned to find validation in my own accomplishments rather than constantly seeking their approval. Still, a stubborn, childish part of me kept hoping they'd eventually see me, really see me, and acknowledge what I'd built on my own. That's why I decided to come home for Christmas last year. I considered begging off, maybe taking a solo trip somewhere warm. But Christmas had always been sacred, a time when childhood memories were supposed to outweigh adult tensions. Plus, I had spent months planning the perfect gift for my father, something that required considerable financial sacrifice, even with my comfortable salary, something that would finally make him understand I wasn't just the safe daughter who chose numbers over passion, but someone who deeply understood what family truly meant. In October, while helping Mom find old photo albums in the attic during a quick visit, I'd accidentally discovered something truly troubling. A stack of foreclosure notices addressed to my father. His contracting business had been struggling for years, something he'd never once mentioned during our weekly calls. The family home, the place where Emma and I had grown up, was 3 months away from being taken by the bank. Instead of confronting him immediately, I contacted the bank directly. Using a significant portion of my savings and liquidating some investments, I arranged to pay off the entire remaining mortgage balance. It took countless calls, meetings with financial advisors, and a considerable hit to my own future security, but I did it. The house was now fully paid for, with the deed transferred to remain in our family name. I had the documents prepared, placed in a simple, elegant box, wrapped in Dad's favorite gold paper in a red bow. I imagined his face when he realized what I had done, that his pragmatic daughter had saved the family home without being asked, without needing recognition. Maybe then he would see that my financial mind wasn't cold or calculating, but a different kind of creativity, one that could protect what mattered most. As I packed my bags for the drive on Christmas Eve, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and overwhelming hope. This Christmas would be different. This Christmas, things would change. The snow was falling in gentle flurries as I pulled into the driveway. Through the frosted windows, I could see the glow of our traditional Douglas fir, covered in the same ornaments Mom insisted on using since our childhood. I sat in my car for a few extra moments, taking deep breaths. My gift for Dad was tucked safely in my overnight bag. This year would be different, I told myself again. This year I would finally break through the invisible wall that had formed between me and the rest of my family. And Emma's battered Volkswagen, already parked haphazardly near the garage, dusted with fresh snow. Of course, she'd arrived before me, despite living further away. She probably hadn't had to work a full day before driving up, I thought, then immediately felt guilty for the uncharitable assumption. Mom answered the door before I could knock, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of cinnamon and pine. "Stephanie, we were wondering when you'd get here." "Traffic bad. Just finishing up some work things," I explained, stomping snow from my boots. The house was warm and festive, garlands draped, holiday candles flickering. Emma appeared from the kitchen, a glass of mulled wine in hand. Her hair, now dyed a vibrant red, complemented her green sweater. She looked like a Christmas elf, and I felt suddenly plain in my practical navy blue turtleneck and jeans. "The corporate world finally released you," she teased, giving me a one-armed hug. "I was telling Mom and Dad about this amazing opportunity one. Might have for a gallery showing in the spring." "That's great," I said, meaning it, despite the familiar pang of knowing my own news, a potential promotion to senior analyst, would once again take a back seat. Dinner was a stilted affair. Dad seemed distracted, picking at his food. Mom kept filling silences with questions about Emma's art and her connections. I answered questions about my work with brief, technical responses that glazed their eyes over, confirming my suspicion that they were asking out of obligation, not genuine interest. Several times I noticed my parents exchanging meaningful glances. Twice, I caught them whispering to Emma when they thought I wasn't looking. A familiar cold feeling settled in my stomach, the sense of being an outsider in my own family. After dinner, as we gathered for our traditional Christmas Eve hot chocolate, the whispers became more obvious. "Should we tell her now?" I heard Mom murmur to Dad when I returned from the bathroom. "Tomorrow with everything else," Dad replied, his voice tight with what sounded like stress. Emma caught my eye as I re-entered and had the grace to look embarrassed, quickly changing the subject to ask about my apartment's harbor view. I played along, describing the morning light hitting the water, but my mind was racing. What were they planning? Was this about the foreclosure? Did they somehow know what I had done? That night, in my childhood bedroom, I lay awake staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to my ceiling. The house creaked around me, familiar sounds that had once been comforting, but now felt like whispers of secrets being kept. I thought back to Christmases past. The year Emma received an expensive set of oil paints while I got practical clothes for college. The Christmas Dad spent hours helping Emma set up her new laptop with art software, while my equally new laptop for schoolwork remained in its box. The countless times my practical gifts were acknowledged with polite thanks, while Emma's creative presence received effusive praise. I wasn't jealous of Emma, not exactly. I loved my sister and understood she navigated the world differently. What hurt was the feeling that my parents valued her struggles more than my successes, as though choosing a stable path somehow made me less interesting, less worthy of their enthusiasm. Morning arrived with the soft gray light of a snowy New England Christmas. For a moment, lying in my childhood bed, I felt the simple excitement I remembered. Then reality crashed back. The foreclosure notices, the whispers, the feeling of exclusion. I dressed carefully in a festive red sweater and black slacks, applied light makeup, and styled my hair. Armor for whatever the day might bring. Downstairs, coffee was brewing, Mom arranging cinnamon rolls. Emma sat at the kitchen island in flannel pajamas, looking sleepy but excited. Dad stood by the window, staring out at the snow, his shoulders tense. "Merry Christmas," I said, injecting cheer into my voice. They all turned, startled, as though they'd forgotten I was in the house. Another ping. "Merry Christmas, honey," Mom replied, recovering quickly. Coffee. The morning rituals proceeded as always, but there was a current of nervous energy. Dad kept checking his watch. Emma couldn't stop smiling. Mom dropped a spoon twice. "Is everything okay?" I finally asked. "Of course," Mom said, too brightly. "Just excited for Christmas." Emma couldn't contain a small giggle, quickly suppressed when Dad shot her a look. The Christmas tree twinkled over a modest pile of presents. In years past, the pile had been larger, but I knew money had been tight. My eyes went to the small, elegantly wrapped box containing the mortgage papers. Would it change things? Would it finally prove that my practical nature could also be generous and loving? As we settled into our usual spots, I noticed a tiny box that hadn't been there the night before. Wrapped in silver paper with an elaborate bow, propped prominently against the tree. It had Emma's name on it, in Dad's distinctive handwriting. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Whatever was happening, I was definitely not part of it. "Well," Dad said, clearing his throat, "I think we should start with that one." He pointed to the silver package. Mom reached for her phone. "Let me get a video of this." Emma looked at me, a strange mix of excitement and something like guilt crossing her face. "You're going to be so surprised," she said. I forced a smile, gripping my coffee mug tighter. "Can't wait!" The living room suddenly felt smaller as all attention focused on that tiny silver package. Outside, snow continued to fall, a perfect Christmas card scene that starkly contrasted with the tension building inside me. "Open it slowly," Mom urged, phone raised. "This is special." Emma, never one for patience, tore into the wrapping paper with childlike enthusiasm. Inside was a small velvet box, the kind that usually held jewelry. My first thought was Mom's heirloom sapphire pendant. A flash of hurt, but I pushed it down. A necklace was just an object. But when Emma opened the box, it wasn't jewelry. It was a key. New, shiny brass, attached to a small house-shaped keychain. Emma's eyes widened. She looked up at our parents in confusion, then growing realization. "Is this what I think it is?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Dad leaned forward, a broad smile spreading across his face. "The little bungalow on Maple Street, the yellow one you always admired? It's yours, sweetheart." Mom was crying now, happy tears streaming down her face as she continued to film. "We closed last week. It's all finished and ready for you to move in." The room seemed to tilt sideways as I processed what was happening. The yellow bungalow was a charming two-bedroom house in a desirable neighborhood, walking distance to cafes and boutiques. I'd admired it myself when it went on the market months ago, noting the listing price of nearly $400,000, a sum I knew my parents could not possibly afford given the foreclosure notices I had found. Emma launched herself across the room, enveloping both our parents in a tearful hug. "I can't believe you did this. This is too much. How did you even afford it?" "Don't worry about that," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. "We've been planning and saving for this for a long time. You deserve a fresh start, a place of your own where you can focus on your art without worrying about rent increases or roommate problems." I sat frozen, coffee in my mug now cold. My sister was being gifted an entire house while our family home faced foreclosure. A house that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars when they couldn't even keep up with their existing mortgage. It made no sense. "Wow, I finally managed," my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. "That is quite a gift." Three faces turned toward me as if suddenly remembering I was in the room. Emma's expression held a flash of guilt before excitement swallowed it again. Mom looked uncomfortable. Dad's was difficult to read. "It's a big step," I continued carefully. "How did you manage to buy a house right now?" I thought things were tight with the business. It was the closest I had come to acknowledging the financial troubles. A shadow crossed Dad's face. "Financial matters are complicated. Stephanie, there are aspects of our planning you're not aware of. Emma has struggled so much with housing stability, Mom added quickly. You have your wonderful apartment and your secure job. Emma needs this foundation to build her future. You will understand someday, Dad said. The dismissive phrase hitting me like a physical blow. When you have children of your own, you'll understand that sometimes you have to make decisions based on who needs the help most. At that moment, the implication was clear. Emma needed help. I did not. Emma deserved extraordinary generosity. I did not. Emma was the child they worried about. I was the one they took for granted. I thought about the foreclosure notices hidden upstairs. I thought about the considerable sum I had spent to save our family home. Money that could have gone toward a down payment on my own house. I thought about years of swallowing my hurt when my achievements were acknowledged with mere nods, while Emma's smallest efforts were celebrated like conquests. Right, I said quietly. Of course. Emma was already talking excitedly about paint colors, where she'd set up her easel, the garden she'd plant. Mom was suggesting furniture arrangements. Dad was explaining property taxes were prepaid for the first year. I sat silently, invisible once again, watching my family celebrate. The weight of the mortgage papers and my own gift to Dad suddenly felt like a stone in my stomach. What would happen when he opened it? Would he be grateful? Embarrassed? Would this extravagant gift to Emma make my own gesture seem manipulative or showy? When can I see it? Emma was asking, clutching the key. We can drive over later today, Dad replied. Utilities are on, cleaning service went through last week. I can't believe you kept this a secret for so long. Emma marveled. I couldn't help myself. How long have you been planning this? I asked. Mom and Dad exchanged a glance. We started looking at options about 6 months ago, Mom said, when Emma's landlord first mentioned he might sell her building. 6 months ago. Right around the time the foreclosure notices had started arriving. Right around the time Dad had begun to look tired and stressed during our video calls, brushing off my questions about whether everything was okay. I took a deep breath. Well, it's an incredibly generous gift. Your gift is coming too, Stephanie, Mom said quickly, misinterpreting my comment as jealousy. We have a lovely set of professional cookware for your apartment since you mentioned wanting to learn more recipes. Cookware. Emma got a house, and I was getting cookware. The disparity was so absurd, I almost laughed. Thank you, I said automatically. That will be very useful. Emma was examining the key more closely. What's engraved on it? She said, squinting. It says, Adam's family home, Dad explained. Because it's yours, but also part of our family legacy now. Family legacy. The phrase echoed in my mind as I glanced at the wrapped box containing the deed to the actual Adams family home. The one that would have been lost without my intervention. The one they had apparently decided was less important than buying Emma a house of her own. Should we continue with the other presents? I suggested, my voice sounding strained. Yes, of course, Mom said, seemingly relieved. There are gifts for everyone. As the morning continued, I went through the motions. I admired the cookware. I thanked them for the scarf and earrings. I watched Emma receive art supplies, clothing, and home essentials for her new house. I passed out my own carefully chosen gifts. A first edition for Mom, a handcrafted watch for Dad, and for Emma, a set of professional grade pastels. All the while, Dad's gift for me remained under the tree, the last present. The longer it sat there, the more I questioned whether I should invent an excuse to take it back. But something in me, pride, hurt, or perhaps just the desire for truth, would not let me. So I waited, making small talk, for the moment everything would change. The pile of open presents grew. Wrapping paper scattered. Emma had started a list for her new house. I maintained a careful smile, participating in conversations while feeling increasingly detached, like I was watching a Christmas movie about someone else's family. Finally, only one present remained. My gift to Dad. Alone, the gold wrapping catching the lights. I had spent extra time on the wrapping, wanting the outside to match the significance of what was inside. Looks like we saved the best for last, Mom said, nodding. That one is for you, Robert, from Stephanie. Dad, who had been helping Emma research paint swatches, looked up with mild surprise. Oh, I thought we were finished. He set the tablet aside. Must be something special for my successful daughter. His tone was light, joking. But there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Nervousness, perhaps. Did he suspect? It's nothing really, I said automatically, the instinct to downplay my own contributions deeply ingrained. Now, Dad said, reaching for the present. Don't sell yourself short. Your gifts are always thoughtful. He took his time untying the bow, carefully preserving the wrapping paper. His methodical unwrapping, normally endearing, now stretched my nerves to the breaking point. I found myself holding my breath. Finally, he lifted the lid of the simple black box. His expression changed immediately, confusion replacing polite anticipation. He moved aside the tissue paper, revealing the legal documents inside, the mortgage satisfaction letter on top, followed by the deed to the house, now free and clear. Dad's smile vanished instantly. He froze, his hands still as he stared at the papers. What is it? Mom asked, leaning forward. Stephanie, what did you give him? Emma looked up, finally diverted from house planning. I swallowed hard before speaking. It's the mortgage to this house, I said quietly. Paid in full. The room went completely silent. Even the Christmas music seemed to fade. Dad's hands trembled slightly as he lifted the letter, reading it with increasing disbelief. How did you? His voice trailed off. I found the foreclosure notices in October, I explained, my voice steady despite my racing heart. When I was helping Mom look for photo albums in the attic, I saw that the house was 3 months away from being taken by the bank. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Foreclosure? Robert, what is she talking about? Dad's face had drained of color. He looked older suddenly, the lines around his eyes more pronounced. Margaret, I was going to tell you. You were trying to handle it by buying Emma a house when you couldn't pay for this one. The words escaped before I could stop them. Sharper than I intended. Emma's expression shifted from confusion to shock. What? Dad, is this true? Were you losing the family home? Dad placed the papers carefully on the coffee table, his movements deliberate. Buying time. The business has been struggling for years, he finally admitted. The pandemic, supply chain issues, rising costs. I've been using our retirement savings to keep it afloat, but it wasn't enough. The mortgage fell behind. And you didn't tell me? Mom's voice was barely audible. Hurt and betrayal evident. I didn't want to worry you, Dad replied. I thought I could figure it out. By buying me a house. Emma asked incredulously. How does that make any sense? Dad looked at her, then at me, then down at his hands. The bungalow was significantly less expensive than what we owed on this mortgage. The plan was to sell this house before the foreclosure became final, pay off what we could, and use the bungalow as our fresh start. Emma would let us live with her until we got back on our feet. The pieces clicked together in my mind with sickening clarity. So, the house was never really for Emma. It was for all of you. An escape plan. Emma sat back against the sofa cushions. The excitement completely evaporated. You weren't giving me a house. You were making me your safety net. It wasn't like that, Mom protested, though her voice lacked conviction. We were helping you while also helping ourselves. We would have told you the complete situation once we were settled. But now it doesn't matter, Dad said, looking back at the mortgage documents. Because somehow Stephanie has paid off the entire mortgage. He looked up at me, his expression a mix of shame, relief, and astonishment. How? This was over $200,000 still outstanding. I liquidated some investments, I said simply. Used most of my savings. Took a small loan against my 401k. You sacrificed your own financial security, Dad stated. Not a question, but a realization. Yes. Why didn't you just tell us you knew? Why go behind our backs? There was a defensive edge to his question. I met his gaze directly. Would you have accepted my help if I had offered it openly? Or would you have told me not to worry, that you had it under control? That I should focus on my own life like you always do? Dad had no answer. We both knew the truth. Emma was staring at the key in her hand. The symbol of what she had thought was generosity, now revealed as something far more complicated. So what happens now? She asked quietly. Is this still my house? Was any of this real? No one answered immediately. The perfect Christmas morning had unraveled completely. Years of family dynamics and hidden truths now exposed in the harsh light of day. I think, I finally said, breaking the heavy silence, that we need to have an honest conversation, all of us. About money, about expectations, about how this family really works. Dad nodded slowly, the mortgage papers still in his hands. Yes, he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. I think we do. The silence that followed felt endless. Outside, the snow continued to fall, insulating our family drama from the rest of the world. The Christmas tree lights blinked rhythmically, casting alternating shadows across 4 stunned faces. Mom was the first to move, pushing herself up from the sofa with unusual stiffness. I need tea for this conversation, she announced, her voice tight. Strong tea. I'll help, Emma volunteered quickly, seemingly grateful for any excuse to escape the tension. Dad and I were left alone. The mortgage documents between us on the coffee table like a physical manifestation of all that had gone unspoken for years. How long has the business been struggling? I asked quietly. Dad rubbed his face with both hands, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. Seriously struggling about 3 years, but the warning signs were there earlier. I just didn't want to see them. And you never thought to tell me? I work in finance, Dad. I could have helped before it got this bad. You're my daughter, not my financial advisor, he replied, a hint of his usual stubbornness returning. It wasn't your burden to bear, but it was Emma's. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Dad sighed heavily. That was not our finest plan. We convinced ourselves we were helping her while helping ourselves. 2 birds, 1 stone. Before I could respond, Mom and Emma returned with a tray of steaming mugs. No one reached for the cookies. All right, Mom said as she settled back onto the sofa, noticeable distance now between her and Dad. I think we all need to lay our cards on the table. Robert, you start. How bad is it really? Dad looked around at our faces, perhaps realizing there was no more room for half-truths. The business is essentially bankrupt, he admitted. I've been keeping it alive with personal funds, but I can't do that anymore. We have about $3,000 in our checking account. No retirement savings left. And until this morning, we were facing foreclosure on this house within 90 days. And my house? Emma asked. The bungalow? How did you pay for that? Dad exchanged a glance with Mom before answering. It was bank-owned, a foreclosure itself. We got it for $190,000, well below market value. I took a loan against my life insurance policy for the down payment, and the mortgage payments are actually less than what we were paying on this house. So, you were planning to lose this house? Move in with Emma. And then what? I pressed. Start over, Dad said simply. Downsize the business to just me, no employees. Focus on smaller jobs I could handle myself. Build back up gradually. While living with me, Emma clarified, her voice uncharacteristically hard. It would have been temporary, Mom insisted. A year at most. Emma shook her head in disbelief. And when were you planning to tell me this part of the arrangement? After I'd moved in? After I'd painted and decorated? After I'd started thinking of it as my own space? We were going to tell you today, Dad said. After the initial excitement wore off, we thought it would be easier if you saw it as your house first, with us as guests. Manipulative guests. I couldn't help adding. That is unfair, Stephanie. Mom snapped. We were drowning. We did what we thought was best for everyone by lying to everyone. The question hung in the air. Mom's face crumpled slightly. We didn't lie. We just didn't tell the whole truth. And what about you, Mom? I asked, realizing something didn't quite add up. Did you really not know about any of this? The business problems, the foreclosure. Mom's eyes flicked to Dad, then down to her tea. I knew things were tight, she admitted. I didn't know how tight. Robert handles the finances. He always has. Margaret, Dad began, but she cut him off. But I haven't been completely honest either, she continued, her voice strengthening. I've been having health problems. I haven't told any of you about severe migraines, dizziness. I've been to several specialists in the past year. Now it was Dad's turn to look shocked. What? When? How did I not know this? I scheduled appointments during your work hours. Paid the co-pays in cash, so they wouldn't show up on the credit card statements you review. Mom's laugh was hollow. I guess we've all been keeping secrets. Emma set down her mug with enough force that tea sloshed onto the coffee table. This is insane. Our entire family is built on lies. Mom is hiding health issues. Dad is hiding financial collapse. You two are conspiring to use me as a housing solution without telling me the truth. And Stephanie is secretly paying off mortgages. I was trying to help, I said defensively, by going behind everyone's back. Emma countered. Just like they did. The accusation stung because there was truth in it. Had I not been just as dishonest by concealing what I knew and what I had done? Why didn't you just tell me what you found? Dad asked again, echoing my own thoughts. I took a deep breath, searching for honesty. Because I knew you wouldn't accept my help. You never do. You and Mom have spent my entire life telling me how capable I am, how I don't need guidance or support, how I always land on my feet. Meanwhile, Emma gets endless help, endless support, endless resources. If I had confronted you about the foreclosure and offered to help, you would have told me to keep my money, that you would figure it out. Is that so wrong? Dad challenged, wanting my daughters to be independent. But you only want one of your daughters to be independent, I replied, the words I had held back for years, finally breaking free. The other one gets rescued constantly. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To watch your parents bend over backwards to help your sister while treating your accomplishments as expected and unremarkable. That's not fair, Mom protested. It is not, I countered. When was the last time you celebrated something I achieved with even half the enthusiasm you show when Emma sells a single painting? When have you ever offered to help me with anything, assuming I didn't need it because I'm the responsible one? We are proud of you, Dad insisted. Being proud is not the same as being supportive, I said. And it certainly doesn't explain why you would buy Emma a house while losing your own. Emma, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. She's right. You do treat us differently. Her voice was small but clear. You always have. Mom and Dad exchanged startled glances. You've always acted like Stephanie has everything figured out, Emma continued. Like she doesn't need anything from you. Do you know how much pressure that puts on me? To be the one who always needs rescuing. Sometimes I feel like the only way I get your attention is by struggling. This was a revelation I had not expected. I had always assumed Emma enjoyed her position as the family focus, that she deliberately played up her difficulties. That can't be true, Mom said, but she sounded uncertain. It is, Emma insisted. And meanwhile, I've been jealous of Stephanie for years, for her stability, her confidence, the way she never seems to need validation from anyone. The truth is, I felt like a failure compared to her for most of my adult life. I stared at my sister in disbelief. You're jealous of me? When they so obviously favor you. They don't favor me, Emma said. They worry about me. There's a difference. Worry is not the same as respect. The room fell silent as we all absorbed this new perspective. Was it possible we had all been misreading the family dynamic for years? Dad cleared his throat. I think perhaps your mother and I have made some serious mistakes, he said slowly. We thought we were responding to each of you according to your needs. But maybe we were just reinforcing harmful patterns and lying to each other in the process. All of us, Mom added quietly, reaching for Dad's hand despite her earlier anger. All of us. So what now? Emma asked, holding up the house key. What happens with the bungalow? With this house? Dad looked at the mortgage papers on the table, then at me. Stephanie has saved the family home, he said simply, at significant personal cost. The least we can do is be honest about our situations going forward. It was a start, but there were still so many unresolved questions hanging in the air. How would Dad rebuild his business? What was wrong with Mom's health? What would happen with Emma's house? And how would our family dynamic change now that our roles, the responsible daughter, the struggling artist, the protective father, the nurturing mother, had been so thoroughly disrupted? I looked around at the three faces I had known my entire life, wondering if I had ever truly seen them clearly before this moment. The conversation moved from the living room to the kitchen as Mom insisted we needed food to continue such an emotionally draining discussion. There was something comforting in the familiar routine of her pulling leftovers from the refrigerator and Dad automatically setting the table. Small actions that suggested that despite all that had been revealed, some fundamental connections remained intact. Emma and I sat at opposite ends of the kitchen island, both unusually quiet, as we processed the morning's revelations. The house key sat between us, no longer a simple gift, but a complicated symbol of our family's tangled dynamics. I want to understand exactly what happened with the business, I said as Mom placed reheated ham and scalloped potatoes in front of us. The complete truth, Dad. No more protecting us from reality. Dad took a deep breath, serving himself a much smaller portion than usual. It started before the pandemic, actually. The construction industry in this area was getting more competitive, with bigger companies from Boston moving into our territory. They could underbid me on larger projects because of their volume discounts on materials. He described how he had initially tried to compete by cutting his own margins, working longer hours, reducing his staff. Then the pandemic hit. Projects dried up completely for months, and material costs soared. I took out a business loan to stay afloat, he continued. Then a second one. I kept thinking things would turn around. But then supply chain issues meant I couldn't complete projects on time, which led to penalties and unhappy clients. Why didn't you tell me any of this during our weekly calls? I asked. Dad's laugh was hollow. What father wants to admit failure to his daughter? Especially the daughter who excels at exactly the thing he's failing at, financial management. I could have helped, I insisted. Before it got so bad. Would you have wanted my advice if our situations were reversed? He challenged gently. The question gave me pause. Would I have accepted help? Or would my pride have stopped me? Mom cleared her throat. While we're being honest, I should explain about my health issues, too. She described months of debilitating migraines that had become increasingly frequent. 3 different neurologists, a battery of tests, and still no clear diagnosis. She had been managing with prescription medications that left her foggy and fatigued. I didn't want to worry any of you, she explained. And I suppose I didn't want to acknowledge that something might be seriously wrong. Do they think it could be something serious? Emma asked, her earlier anger softened by concern. They don't know yet, Mom admitted. The latest doctor wants me to see a specialist in Boston for more advanced testing. Tests that cost money we don't have, Dad added quietly. The pieces were falling into place now. Dad's desperate financial maneuvers, the secrecy, even the bizarre plan involving Emma's house. They had been drowning in problems they felt they couldn't share. My turn for honesty, Emma said suddenly. We all turned to look at her, surprised. I haven't been entirely truthful about my art career either. That gallery opportunity one mentioned. It fell through months ago. Actually, I've been working at a coffee shop for the past year just to make rent. My art hasn't sold in 18 months. But you always talk about your projects, your connections, Mom said, confusion evident. Emma's smile was sad. Because that's what you expect from me. To be the creative one, pursuing her passion. I didn't want to admit that I'm nearly 32 and might have failed at the only thing I've ever wanted to do. So, you've been struggling even more than we knew, Dad said slowly. Emma nodded. Which makes your plan to buy me a house, and then move in with me even more absurd. I can barely support myself, let alone help you two start over. The truth hung heavy in the air. Each of us had been performing a role we thought the others needed us to play, all while hiding our real struggles and fears. And you, Stephanie? Mom asked gently. What truths have you been keeping from us besides paying off our mortgage? I stared down at my barely touched food, considering the question. I guess I've been pretending that your opinions don't matter to me, I finally admitted, acting like I'm completely self-sufficient because that's what everyone expects. But the truth is, I've spent my entire adult life still seeking your approval, still hoping you would one day be as enthusiastic about my path as you are about Emma's. Oh, honey, Mom said, reaching across the table for my hand. I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty, I continued. I'm just trying to be honest. I've been jealous of the attention Emma gets. Well, apparently she's been jealous of the respect I get. We've both been missing what the other had. Emma caught my eye across the table and gave me a small, sad smile of recognition. The irony, Dad said, shaking his head, is that your mother and I have spent years thinking we were doing what was best for both of you, supporting Emma's creativity because it seemed more fragile, celebrating your independence because it seemed to be what you wanted. We never meant to make either of you feel less valued. Mom added, we love you both so much, just in different ways. Maybe that's the problem, I suggested. Loving us differently instead of simply loving us equally. We continued talking through the afternoon, unpacking years of misunderstandings and unspoken expectations. There were moments of tension, brief flares of old resentments, but also surprising instances of connection and recognition. For perhaps the first time, we were seeing each other as we truly were, flawed, vulnerable, and human, rather than the roles we had assigned each other. As the short winter day began to darken outside, Dad returned to the practical matter at hand. "About the houses," he said. "Stephanie has saved this one, which I am more grateful for than I can express, but we still have the bungalow with a new mortgage we arguably cannot afford." "We could sell it," Mom suggested. "Use the proceeds to help rebuild our retirement savings." "It was supposed to be Emma's gift," Dad said, looking at my sister. "Even if our plan was flawed, we did want you to have a place of your own." Emma looked at the key that still sat on the kitchen island. "I think," she said slowly, "that I need to stand on my own feet for real. Not with a house I didn't earn. Not with constant rescuing." She pushed the key toward Dad. "Sell it. Use the money to rebuild. Maybe help Mom get the medical care she needs." "Are you sure?" Mom asked. Emma nodded. "For once, I want to solve my own problems." I considered the situation, my analyst mind automatically running numbers. "The housing market in this area is strong," I said. "You could likely sell the bungalow for more than you paid, especially if it was bank-owned. That would give you some breathing room." "And the business?" Dad asked, looking at me with new respect. "We can look at the books together," I offered. "See if there's a path to restructuring, or if it makes more sense to wind it down and perhaps start something smaller, more specialized." "I would appreciate that," Dad said, the words clearly difficult for him to say. As we continued discussing practical next steps, I felt something shift in the atmosphere between us. The walls of secrecy and pretense had crumbled, leaving us seeing each other clearly, perhaps for the first time in years. There was pain in that clarity, but also possibility, the chance to build something more authentic than what had come before. "I think," Mom said as she rose to make a fresh pot of coffee, "that this might be the most honest Christmas we have ever had." None of us could disagree with that. 6 months after that revelatory Christmas, we gathered again around the family dining table. The season had changed from winter's stark clarity to summer's lush abundance, and the family dynamics had undergone an equally dramatic transformation. The kitchen windows were open, letting in a warm breeze that carried the scent of the garden Mom had planted as part of her therapy. After extensive testing, her doctors had finally diagnosed her condition as a treatable form of vestibular migraine. The medication regimen was helping, and the simple act of gardening had become both physical therapy and stress relief. Dad moved around the kitchen with new energy, preparing a simple but delicious meal. The construction business had been formally closed 3 months ago, a difficult but ultimately liberating decision, with my help. He had found a position as a construction manager for a commercial development firm. Less pressure, regular hours, and a steady income with benefits that covered Mom's medical expenses. "How's the new apartment working out?" I asked Emma as we set the table together. She smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Small but perfect, and completely affordable on my new salary." After confronting the reality of her stalled art career, Emma had made a bold decision to pivot. She had leveraged her creative skills and coffee shop experience to land a position as a marketing coordinator for a local brewery. She still created art in her free time, but without the pressure of depending on it for income. "And they actually value my artistic background," she added. "I'm designing all their seasonal labels now." "That is fantastic," I said, meaning it. The competition that had characterized our relationship for so long had mellowed into something more supportive. Our parents' house, now officially saved and secure, had undergone small but meaningful changes. The living room had been repainted in a brighter color. Family photos that had been stored away for years now lined the hallway, including several of Emma and me together as children before competition, and comparison had created distance between us. We settled around the table, the conversation flowing more naturally than it had in years. No one was performing a role or hiding difficulties. We had learned painfully but definitively that secrets ultimately cause more damage than the truths they were meant to protect. "I have news," I announced as we finished the main course. "I've been offered a promotion at the firm. Senior financial advisor with my own client portfolio." "Stephanie, that is wonderful," Mom exclaimed with genuine enthusiasm. "They want me to specialize in family financial planning. I continued, helping multiple generations navigate their finances together. Apparently, my personal experience gave me some insight. Dad laughed at that. I would say so. You saved our family from financial ruin. We saved ourselves, I corrected gently, all of us, by finally being honest. Speaking of honesty, Emma said, setting down her fork, I've been meaning to ask you something. Stephanie, are you really okay with how everything turned out? You spent a huge amount of your savings to save this house, and now Dad and Mom are back on their feet, and I'm finding my way. But what about you? Have you been able to rebuild your own financial safety net? The question was asked with sincere concern, not the competitive edge that might have colored it in the past. I considered my answer carefully. Financially, I'm getting there, I replied honestly. The promotion helps, but what I gained in other ways has been worth far more than money. For years, I measured my worth in this family by achievements and milestones. I thought if I was successful enough, independent enough, you would all see me the way you saw Emma, as someone worth investing in emotionally. We always valued you, Mom protested softly. I know you did, I acknowledged. But we all got caught in patterns that made it hard to show love in ways each of us could recognize. Dad and I spoke the language of practical achievements. Mom and Emma connected through emotional support. We were all trying to love each other, just not in ways that translated across the divide. Dad nodded slowly. I always thought I was showing you respect by not interfering, by trusting your judgment. I never realized it felt like distance to you. And I thought I was protecting all of you by handling problems myself, I added. But really, I was just reinforcing the walls between us. After dinner, we moved to the back porch. The evening was warm, fireflies beginning to blink in the gathering dusk. We had established a new tradition over these past months. Regular family dinners where we deliberately practiced honest communication, even when it was uncomfortable. I sold the bungalow, Dad said as we settled into the porch chairs. Final closing was yesterday. Although we had all known this was coming, the finality of it still carried emotional weight. How do you feel about it? I asked Emma. She considered the question. Relieved, actually. That house represented so many complicated things. Dad's secret struggles, my own insecurities, our family's tendency to solve problems with band-aids instead of honest conversation. It feels clean to have it resolved. The proceeds cover the remaining mortgage and gave us a small cushion, Dad explained. Nothing extravagant, but enough that your mother and I can start rebuilding our retirement savings. And we've created a family emergency fund, Mom added, with clear guidelines about when and how we ask each other for help. It was another new tradition, approaching family finances with transparency rather than pride or secrecy. We had drafted a simple agreement, all four of us, about how we would handle money issues going forward. Not because we didn't trust each other, but because we now understood how easily unspoken expectations could create misunderstandings. As darkness fell, and we prepared to head our separate ways, Emma to her apartment across town, me to my place in the city, Dad pulled me aside. I never properly thanked you, he said quietly. Not just for the mortgage, but for forcing us all to face reality. It wasn't done gracefully, I admitted. I could have found a better way to address it all. Maybe, he acknowledged, but I'm not sure we would have listened to a gentler approach. Sometimes a shock is needed to break through denial. He hugged me then, a real embrace, rather than the perfunctory goodbye I had grown accustomed to over the years. I have always been proud of you, he said, but now I understand you better, and that is worth even more. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the phrase that had hurt so deeply at Christmas. You will understand someday. Dad had been wrong about what I would understand. It wasn't about favoring one child over another or making unequal gifts. What I came to understand was much more valuable, that families are imperfect systems built by imperfect people. That love can be present even when expressed awkwardly. And that honesty, however painful, is the only foundation solid enough to support real connection. The mortgage papers that had changed everything now sat in Dad's office drawer, a reminder not of financial transactions, but of emotional ones. By saving the physical house, I had inadvertently forced us to rebuild the home within it, the connections, trust, and understanding that make a family more than just people who share DNA. As I pulled into my apartment building's parking garage, My phone chimed with a group text from Emma, a selfie of her in her small but cheerful apartment, paintbrush in hand, with the caption, "Art for joy, not for rent money." We had started checking in with each other regularly, building the sister relationship we had never fully developed growing up. Understanding someday had come sooner than any of us expected, and with it came the recognition that the most valuable gift that Christmas had not been a house or a paid mortgage, but the truth that finally allowed us to see each other clearly, not as roles or expectations, but as people worthy of both honesty and compassion. If my story touched you in any way, please leave a comment sharing your own experience with family dynamics or difficult conversations that changed everything. What would you have done in my place? I'm really curious to know. Thank you for listening, and may your own family stories find paths to honesty, healing, and new beginnings.